My life was a series of checklists and altitude readings. I'm Grant. I've spent 20 years flying cargo over the Brooks Range. My world is one of vibration, the smell of aviation fuel, and the absolute, lonely silence of the tundra. I'm a man of iron and altitude. I don't get attached, I don't take risks, and I never, ever lose my cool. In the cockpit, I am the law. The only variable I couldn't calculate was Finn. Finn was my navigator, a city-born kid with a degree in geospatial mapping and a way of looking at the horizon like it was poetry instead of a flight path. He was bright, observant, and possessed an infuriatingly persistent curiosity about the man sitting in the pilot's seat. He'd bring me coffee I didn't ask for and play music on the headset that made the cockpit feel less like a machine and more like a room. Check the manifold pressure, Finn, I'd tell him, my voice a flat line. Don't look at the sunset. Look at the gauges. The gauges are fine, Grant, he'd say, his voice soft but steady. But the ice on the peaks is turning gold. You should look up for once. The night when the engine failed was the night I realized I'd been flying blind for years. We were over the gates of the Arctic when the oil pressure vanished. A catastrophic seal failure. The engine didn't just cough, it seized, the propeller coming to a jarring, sickening halt that threw the plane into a terrifying, silent glide. I did what I was trained to do. I found a flat stretch of the glacier and brought us down. It wasn't a landing, it was a controlled crash. The skis hit the hard-packed ice, the landing gear buckled, and the world became a spinning kaleidoscope of white and screaming metal before everything went still. I woke up to the smell of hydraulic fluid and the biting, sub-zero wind whistling through the shattered windshield. Finn? I rasped, my chest feeling like it had been hit with a sledgehammer. He was slumped against the navigation console, blood trickling from a cut on his temple. I unbuckled my harness, falling into the snow that was already piling up inside the cabin. I dragged him out, my hands framing his face as the first wave of a massive Arctic whiteout hit us. We couldn't stay in the plane. The fuselage was torn open, and the wind was turning it into a freezer. I dragged him to the emergency survival kit, my breath coming in jagged, white plumes. I managed to pitch the small, orange survival tent in the lee of the wreckage, the fabric snapping violently in the gale. Inside the tent, the world was 6 feet wide and terrifyingly quiet. Finn was awake, but he was in the early stages of shock. He was shivering so hard his teeth were clicking, a rhythmic, desperate sound that cut through me. I'd spent 20 years being the captain, the man who knew exactly what to do, but as I looked at Finn, I realized that all the checklists in the world couldn't fix the hole in my chest that opened every time I saw him in pain. Grant, he whispered, his eyes wide and glassy. It's so cold. I've got you, I said, my voice rough. I knew the protocol. In these temperatures, you don't wait. I stripped off my heavy, frozen flight jacket. I helped him out of his wet outer gear, my fingers fumbling with the zippers. I pulled him into the double-rated sleeping bag I'd laid out, then I climbed in after him. I pulled him flush against me, his back to my chest, my arms wrapped tightly around him. I was trying to be his heat, trying to be the barrier between him and the ice. He was shaking violently, his breath hitching in a way that made me tighten my grip. I tucked my face into the crook of his neck, feeling the frantic, rapid pulse beneath his skin. Breathe with me, Finn, I murmured. Just focus on my heartbeat. Stay right here. Slowly, the violent tremors began to soften into long, shuddering sighs. The heat began to build between us, trapped by the layers of the bag and the small, confined space of the tent. I could feel every line of him, the curve of his shoulder, the way his breath was starting to find a rhythm with mine. The professional distance I'd maintained for months was gone. There was no captain, no navigator. There was just 2 men in a thin orange bag, fighting the dark. Finn shifted, turning in my arms until we were face to face. The space was so small our noses were brushing. His eyes were dark, searching mine in the dim, orange-tinted light of the tent. The fear was receding, replaced by a raw, naked vulnerability. "Why did you come back for me?" he whispered. "You could have hit the distress beacon and stayed in the cockpit. You didn't have to drag me out. Don't be an idiot, I said, but the words had no weight. My voice broke. I wasn't leaving you. Grant, he breathed, his hand coming up to touch my jaw. His fingers were warming up, his touch a soft, electric contrast to the freezing world outside. You've spent all this time trying to be iron. But you're burning up. I didn't answer with words. I couldn't. The denial, the checklists, the code of silence, it all shattered. I leaned in and captured his mouth with mine. The kiss was a disaster of relief and adrenaline. It was the taste of coffee, salt, and the fierce, defiant heat of survival. It wasn't the move of a man in control, it was the raw, unrefined reach of someone who had finally admitted he was lost. Finn made a low, guttural sound and pulled me closer, his arms locking around my neck, his body pressing into mine as if he were trying to find the center of the sun. The wind was screaming outside, the glacier was shifting beneath us, and the world was 1,000 miles of frozen white. But in the dark, in the heat of his mouth on mine, I realized that for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't just surviving. I was home.